The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Willow Creek, Montana Territory, as Flora Valenti clutched her swollen belly and ducked behind a water trough. The year was 1876, and being 7 months with child and alone made her both a curiosity and a target for the cruel tongues that wagged incessantly in this frontier town. She hadn't meant to find herself in the middle of a saloon brawl that had spilled onto the main street, but here she was, praying that neither she nor her unborn child would catch a stray bullet. "Get down, madam," a deep voice commanded as a tall figure dove beside her, shielding her with his broad shoulders. Dust billowed around them as more shots rang out. Flora looked up into the face of a stranger, a man with sun-weathered skin, piercing blue eyes, and a day's worth of stubble on his strong jaw. His hat had fallen off in his hurry to protect her, revealing dark hair with hints of copper where the sunlight touched it. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes quickly assessing her condition before returning to her face. "No," Flora managed, her breath coming in short gasps. "Just frightened." "Name's Xavier Ellison," he said, peering cautiously over the trough. "Most folks call me Xav." He ducked back down as another shot splintered wood nearby. "This ain't no place for a lady in your condition." Flora bristled despite their precarious situation. "I was simply trying to reach the general store when these drunken fools started their quarrel." Xav nodded, then removed his revolver from its holster. "When I say run, you head straight for that alley." He pointed to a narrow passage between the mercantile and the barber shop. "I'll cover you." Before Flora could protest, he stood and fired 2 warning shots into the air. "That's enough," he shouted with an authority that momentarily silenced the brawlers. "There's a lady and child present." "Lady?" someone jeered. "You mean fallen Flora and her bastard?" Flora flinched at the nickname that had followed her since her arrival 3 months ago. She'd hoped that Willow Creek, being 300 miles from her past, would offer a fresh start. She'd been wrong. Zav's jaw tightened at the slur. "Run now," he whispered to her, and Flora obeyed, one hand supporting her belly as she hurried toward the alley. The cowboy followed shortly after, holstering his gun as the town marshal finally arrived to break up the fight. "You all right?" he asked when he reached her side. "Yes, thank you." Flora straightened her simple calico dress, trying to maintain her dignity. "I'm accustomed to such comments." Zav studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "No one should get accustomed to being treated with disrespect, madam." "Flora?" she offered. "Flora Valenti." "Miss Valenti." He tipped his hat, which he'd retrieved on his way to her. "Let me escort you wherever you were headed." "That's not necessary, Mr. Ellison." "It is to me." His gaze was steady. "I'd consider it a personal favor if you'd allow me to see you safely to your destination." Something in his earnest expression made Flora relent. As they walked toward the general store, she was painfully aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. Zav, however, walked tall beside her, seemingly unbothered by the town's judgment. "You're new to Willow Creek," Flora observed, trying to make conversation. "Passing through," he replied. "Was planning to stay a few days, resupply before heading north to my brother's ranch near Helena." "I see." Flora felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. Another decent person just passing through, while those who stayed were the ones who made her daily life difficult. When they reached the general store, Zav opened the door for her. "Thank you again, Mr. Ellison." "Zav," he corrected with a slight smile. "And you're welcome, Miss Valenti." Flora stepped inside, feeling the store owner's disapproving gaze upon her. Mrs. Tanner was a God-fearing woman who made it clear that she served Flora only because business was business. Today, however, the older woman's sour expression softened slightly when she saw Zav following behind. "Afternoon, Mrs. Tanner," Flora said politely. "I've come for my weekly supplies." "Hm," was the only response, as Mrs. Tanner began gathering items from Flora's list. Zav browsed nearby, seemingly casual, but Flora noticed how his presence kept Mrs. Pau Tanner's usual commentary at bay. When Flora's items were totaled, she reached for her small coin purse. "I'll get that," Xav said, placing money on the counter before Flora could object. "Mr. Ellison, I couldn't possibly consider it payment for the pleasure of your company," he said quietly. "It's not often I meet someone brave enough to face down a town full of narrow minds." Flora wanted to refuse his charity, but the genuine respect in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't pity. It was something else entirely. "Thank you," she said simply. As they left the store, Flora's landlady, Mrs. Peterson, was passing by. The woman's eyes narrowed at the sight of Flora with a man. "Miss Valenti," she called sharply. "A word, if you please." Flora sighed, knowing what was coming. "Yes, Mrs. Peterson?" The landlady eyed Xav suspiciously. "I must remind you that my establishment has rules. No gentlemen callers in the rooms. I run a respectable boarding house. Mrs. Peterson, this is Mr. Ellison. He kindly escorted me to the store after the disturbance in town." Flora kept her voice steady despite her humiliation. "He is not a caller." Xav tipped his hat to the stern woman. "Madam, just doing what any gentleman would do." Mrs. Peterson sniffed. "Well, see that your assistance ends at her doorstep." With that, she continued on her way, back rigid with disapproval. "I should get back," Flora said, feeling the weight of her packages and the day's events. "My room is just down the street." "Allow me." Xav took the heaviest parcel from her arms. They walked in silence for a while before Xav spoke again. "Those comments back there, about you being fallen, does that happen often?" Flora's throat tightened. "Daily. An unmarried woman with child is quite the scandal, even out here where rules are supposedly more relaxed." "And the father?" Flora stopped walking, her eyes flashing. "That is not a subject I discuss with strangers, Mr. Ellison." Xav held up his free hand. "My apologies. That was presumptuous of me." They continued in uncomfortable silence until they reached the boarding house. Flora reached for her package. "Thank you again for your kindness today." Instead of handing over the parcel, Xav hesitated. "Miss Valenti, I was wondering if perhaps you might join me for supper this evening. The hotel has a decent dining room." Flora blinked in surprise. "Mr. Ellison, while I appreciate the offer, I don't think that would be wise." "Because of what people might say?" He raised an eyebrow. "Seems to me they're saying plenty already. Precisely why I shouldn't give them more to talk about." Flora finally took her package from him. "Good day, Mr. Ellison." She turned to go inside, but his voice stopped her. "Miss Valenti." There was something in his tone that made her look back. "That baby you're carrying, it's a blessing. Don't let anyone tell you different." Flora stared at him, momentarily speechless. In the 3 months she'd been in Willow Creek, no one had referred to her child as anything but a burden, a shame, or worse. "That's kind of you to say," she managed. "It's the truth." Zav's blue eyes held hers. "And that baby is my blessing too." Flora's brow furrowed. "I don't understand." "Every child born is a blessing to the whole world, Miss Valenti, not just to its mother." He smiled slightly. "At least, that's what my ma always said." With that, he tipped his hat once more and turned to leave. Flora watched him go, a strange feeling settling in her chest, something like hope, mixed with confusion and a touch of something she couldn't quite name. The next morning, Flora woke to the sounds of hammering coming from behind the boarding house. Curious, she dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen where Mrs. Peterson was aggressively kneading bread dough. "What's that noise?" Flora asked. "That cowboy friend of yours," Mrs. Peterson said with obvious disapproval. "Showed up at dawn asking to fix the back steps and porch. Said they weren't safe for a woman in your condition." She slapped the dough onto the floured board. Offered to do it for room and board for a few days. Flora's eyes widened. Mr. Ellison is staying here? In the boarding house? In the tool shed out back, Mrs. Peterson corrected. I told him I don't have rooms for single men, especially ones who associate with. She stopped herself, but the implication hung in the air. I see, Flora said quietly. Excuse me. She went out the back door and found Xav replacing rotted boards on the porch steps. He'd removed his jacket in the morning heat, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. He looked up at the sound of the door. Morning, Miss Valenti, he said cheerfully. Hope the hammering didn't wake you. It did, actually, Flora replied, but without rancor. Mrs. Peterson tells me you're staying. Xav drove another nail into place before answering. Thought I might. These steps were an accident waiting to happen. He gestured toward her midsection. Can't have you taking a fall. Mr. Ellison, while I appreciate your concern, I don't need charity. It's not charity, he said, standing and wiping his brow with his sleeve. It's neighborly. Besides, I needed somewhere to stay for a spell anyway. Flora crossed her arms. You said you were passing through. Plans change. He shrugged. My brother's ranch will still be there in a week or two. Flora studied him, trying to discern his motives. Men had been kind to her before, but always with expectations. Why are you doing this? Xav considered her question seriously. Because it needs doing, he finally said. And because no one else is stepping up. Before Flora could respond, Mrs. Peterson called her back inside to help with breakfast. Throughout the day, she caught glimpses of Xav working not just on the steps, but on the sagging gate, the leaky rain barrel, and a dozen other small repairs the boarding house needed. That evening, as Flora sat on her small bed, mending a torn seam in one of her dresses, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Mrs. Peterson holding a covered plate. Your friend brought this for you, the older woman said stiffly. Said you didn't come down for supper and thought you might be hungry? Flora accepted the plate, surprised. Thank you. Mrs. Peterson hesitated. He seems decent enough for a drifter. It was as close to approval as Flora was likely to get from her. After the landlady left, Flora uncovered the plate to find a generous portion of stew, bread, and a small bunch of wildflowers tucked alongside. A folded note read simply, A growing blessing needs nourishment. X. Despite herself, Flora smiled. The next day, while hanging laundry in the yard, Flora watched as Xav chopped firewood with efficient, powerful strokes. The town seamstress, Mrs. Barton, had stopped by ostensibly to speak with Mrs. Peterson, but her curious gaze kept drifting to Xav. So, that's the cowboy everyone's talking about, Mrs. Barton remarked to Flora. The one who's taken an interest in your situation. Flora concentrated on pinning a sheet to the line. Mr. Ellison is simply being kind. Men aren't simply anything, dear. Mrs. Barton lowered her voice. Is he the father? Has he come to make an honest woman of you? Flora nearly dropped her laundry basket. Absolutely not. I only met him 2 days ago. Then what does he want? Mrs. Barton persisted. Nothing, Flora insisted, though the question had been nagging at her as well. He's just passing through. Mrs. Barton clearly didn't believe her. Well, whatever his intentions, you'd be wise to keep your distance. Your reputation is already beyond repair, but his presence only makes people talk more. Flora bit back a sharp retort. She needed Mrs. Barton's sewing work to supplement her meager savings. Later, when Xav brought her a cup of water while she was still working with the laundry, Flora couldn't help but mention the conversation. People are talking, she said, accepting the drink gratefully. People always talk, he replied, leaning against the fence post. Especially when they've got nothing better to do. They think you're... Flora hesitated, embarrassed. They think you might be my baby's father, come to claim responsibility. Xav let out a surprised laugh. Is that so? He shook his head. And what do you think, Miss Valenti? I think you're either the kindest man I've ever met or you have ulterior motives I haven't figured out yet. His smile faded. I don't have ulterior motives. Then why? Why help a woman you don't know? One whose reputation could taint your own? Xav was quiet for a long moment. 3 years ago, my sister found herself in a situation similar to yours, he finally said. She was young, scared, alone. The man responsible wanted nothing to do with her or the child. His jaw tightened. I was working a cattle drive when it happened. By the time I got her letter, she was gone. Flora's hand instinctively went to her belly. Gone? She tried to rid herself of the baby. His voice was raw. Neither survived. I'm so sorry, Flora whispered. I should have been there for her, Xav continued. Should have told her that she wasn't alone, that the child was a blessing, not a burden to be ashamed of. He looked directly at Flora. I couldn't help her, but maybe I can help you. Flora blinked back unexpected tears. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me fix that loose window in your room, he said, his tone lightening. Mrs. Peterson mentioned it's been rattling something fierce. Despite everything, Flora found herself smiling. All right, Mr. Ellison, you can fix my window. Xav, he corrected gently. After all this talking we've done, I think we can use first names, don't you? Xav, Flora agreed. And thank you. As days turned into a week, Xav's presence at the boarding house became almost normal. Mrs. Peterson's initial frostiness thawed as he fixed long-neglected problems around the property. Even some of the townspeople began to nod politely to Flora again, their curiosity about the handsome cowboy temporarily overriding their judgment of her. One evening, Xav invited Flora to sit with him on the newly repaired back porch. The setting sun cast long shadows across the yard as they shared cups of coffee. Tell me about yourself, Xav said. Where are you from? How did you end up in Willow Creek? Flora hesitated, then decided he'd earned her trust. I'm from St. Louis originally. My parents died of fever when I was 16. I went to live with my aunt, who ran a boarding house not unlike this one. She paused, memories washing over her. There was a young man, Frederick. His father owned a shipping company. He was charming, educated. She trailed off. And he took advantage, Xav finished quietly. Flora nodded. He promised marriage. I believed him. When I told him about the baby, he denied everything, said I was trying to trap him, that the child could be anyone's. Her hands trembled slightly. His father offered me money to go away quietly. I took it and came west. Why Willow Creek? Xav asked. The train went this far, Flora said simply. And I was tired of traveling. I had hoped, foolishly it seems, that a frontier town might be more forgiving. People are the same everywhere, Xav said. Some good, some bad, most just following along with whatever everyone else thinks. They sat in companionable silence for a while before Flora spoke again. What about you? You mentioned a brother's ranch, but what's your story? Not much to tell, Xav said. Grew up in Kansas. Pa was a rancher, taught me and my brother everything he knew. After he died, Thomas headed to Montana, established his own place. I stayed with Ma until she passed last year. He sipped his coffee. Been drifting since then, taking work where I can find it. Was heading to join Thomas when I stopped here. And got delayed by a damsel in distress, Flora added with a small smile. Something like that, Xav agreed, returning her smile. The moment was interrupted by a sharp pain that made Flora gasp and clutch her belly. Flora? Xav was immediately alert. It's nothing, she assured him as the pain subsided. The baby's been active today, that's all. Xav didn't look convinced. Maybe we should send for the doctor. Dr. Simmons has made it quite clear he doesn't approve of attending to unwed mothers, Flora said bitterly. Besides, it's too early. I still have nearly 2 months. Xav frowned but didn't argue. Instead, he changed the subject, telling her stories about his childhood pranks with his brother that had Flora laughing despite her discomfort. Later that night, Flora woke to another sharp pain. She sat up in bed, breathing slowly until it passed. Just practice contractions, she told herself. The midwife in St. Louis had mentioned these might happen. Nothing to worry about. But when her water broke an hour later, Flora knew something was very wrong. Panic seized her as she realized the baby was coming too soon. She managed to pull on her robe and stumble to her door, intending to wake Mrs. Peterson, but another contraction hit so hard she cried out and fell to her knees. Footsteps pounded up the stairs, and then Xav was there, having heard her from his makeshift bed in the storage room below. "Flora!" He knelt beside her, his face pale with concern in the dim light of the oil lamp he carried. "What's happening?" "The baby," she gasped. "It's coming. Too early. Something's wrong." Without hesitation, Xav scooped her into his arms. "I'm taking you to the doctor." "He won't." "He will," Xav said grimly, already carrying her down the stairs. "I'll make sure of it." Mrs. Peterson appeared in her nightdress, awakened by the commotion. "What in heaven's name?" "The baby's coming," Xav explained quickly. "I'm taking her to Dr. Simmons. Please, bring clean linens and hot water to his office." To Flora's surprise, the landlady nodded without argument. "I'll be right behind you." The journey to the doctor's house was a blur of pain for Flora. She was vaguely aware of Xav speaking to her soothingly, of the cool night air, of being carried up steps, and then Xav pounding on a door. Dr. Simmons opened it, scowling at being awakened. His expression darkened further when he saw who was at his door. "I don't treat—" "You'll treat her," Xav cut him off, pushing past him into the house. "Or I'll make sure every person in this town knows you let a woman and her innocent child suffer because of your so-called morals." The doctor's face reddened. "How dare you? She's having the baby now," Xav said, his voice steel. "And you took an oath to heal the sick and injured, did you not?" Something in Xav's expression must have convinced the doctor, because he grudgingly led them to his examination room. "Put her on the table, then wait outside." "I'm staying," Xav said firmly, carefully setting Flora down. "That's highly improper." "So is letting a mother and child die when you could help them," Xav replied. "I'm staying." Another contraction seized Flora, and she cried out, clutching Xav's hand. The doctor sighed in defeat and began examining her. "The baby is coming breech," he announced after a moment. "It's going to be difficult." The next few hours were the most painful and terrifying of Flora's life. The labor was hard, complicated by the baby's position and its prematurity. Throughout it all, Xav never left her side, letting her crush his hand with each contraction, wiping her brow with a cool cloth, and murmuring encouragement. When Flora's strength began to flag, when she sobbed that she couldn't do it anymore, it was Xav who leaned close and said, "You can, Flora. You're the strongest person I've ever met. This baby is a blessing, remember? Our blessing. And it needs you to fight now." Something about his words about him claiming her child as our blessing gave Flora a final surge of determination. With one last tremendous effort, she pushed her baby into the world. The silence that followed was deafening. "Why isn't it crying?" Flora asked, panic rising in her voice. The doctor worked quickly, clearing the tiny baby's airways, rubbing its back. Then, finally, a thin wail filled the room. "It's a girl," Dr. Simmons announced, sounding surprised. "Small, but she seems strong." He cleaned and swaddled the infant before reluctantly placing her in Flora's arms. The baby was indeed tiny, with a shock of dark hair and skin still tinged bluish, but her little chest rose and fell steadily, and her eyes, when they briefly opened, were alert. "She's beautiful," Flora whispered, tears streaming down her face. Xav was looking at the baby with an expression of wonder. "She certainly is." The doctor cleared his throat. "She's early, nearly 2 months, by my estimation. She'll need special care, kept warm, fed regularly but in small amounts." "I understand," Flora said, not taking her eyes off her daughter. "I'll check on her tomorrow," the doctor continued, his professional demeanor returning despite his personal disapproval. "For now, rest here until morning. You've lost blood and need to recover your strength before moving." As dawn broke, Mrs. Peterson arrived with the promised linens and a small basket containing baby clothes she'd hastily gathered from the church donation box. Her usual stern expression softened when she saw the baby. "She's a little thing, isn't she?" the landlady remarked. "But she has good color now." Flora was surprised by the woman's gentleness. "Thank you for the clothes." Mrs. Peterson nodded, then turned to Xav, who was dozing in a chair beside the examination table. "You should get some rest, Mr. Ellison. I'll stay with her now." Xav blinked awake, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I'm fine here, madam." "At least go get something to eat," she insisted. "The cafe will be opening soon." Reluctantly, Xav agreed. Before leaving, he touched Flora's hand lightly. "You did amazing," he said quietly. "I'll be back soon." After he left, Mrs. Peterson helped Flora clean up and change into a fresh nightgown. As she worked, the older woman spoke hesitantly. "I may have misjudged you, Miss Valenti," she admitted. "The way that man stayed by your side, well, it speaks to your character that you've earned such loyalty." Flora was too tired to be offended by the backhanded compliment. "Xav is a good man." "Yes," Mrs. Peterson agreed, "though I still don't understand his interest, if he's not the father." She gave Flora a questioning look. "He's not," Flora said firmly. "He's just kind." Mrs. Peterson made a non-committal sound and helped Flora settle more comfortably with the baby. When Xav returned an hour later, he wasn't alone. Behind him came several women from town, including Mrs. Barton the seamstress and Mrs. Tanner from the general store. Each carried something: a pot of stew, a small handmade quilt, a tin of tea. "What's all this?" Flora asked, bewildered. "Just some folks who wanted to help," Xav said, though his expression suggested there was more to the story. Mrs. Barton stepped forward, looking somewhat chastened. "We heard about the baby coming early, and about how Mr. Ellison here stood by you." She glanced at the infant. "May I?" Flora hesitantly allowed the seamstress to peek at the sleeping baby. "Oh, she's precious," Mrs. Barton said softly. "What will you call her?" Flora hadn't thought that far ahead. She looked at her daughter's delicate features. "Hope," she decided. "Her name is Hope." "A fine name," Mrs. Tanner approved, setting down her pot of stew. "Now, you need to keep up your strength to feed this little one. Eat while it's hot." As the women bustled around, arranging the gifts and offering advice on caring for a premature baby, Flora caught Xav's eye. He was watching from the doorway, a small smile playing on his lips. Later, when they were alone again, Flora asked, "What did you say to them? They've barely spoken to me in months, except to gossip or criticize." Xav shrugged. "Just told them the truth. That you're a brave woman who's been through a terrible ordeal and needed some Christian charity." His smile turned slightly mischievous. "Might have also mentioned that my brother is one of the largest cattle ranchers in the Montana Territory, and that I'd remember who helped when I was ready to place beef orders for his operation." Flora laughed softly, careful not to disturb the sleeping Hope. "You didn't." "I did," Xav admitted. "But I think they were already feeling guilty. Sometimes people just need a little nudge to do the right thing." 3 days later, Dr. Simmons declared that Flora was strong enough to return to the boarding house, though he cautioned that both she and the baby would need continued rest and care. Hope was still worryingly small, but she was eating well and her color had improved significantly. Word of the premature birth had spread through Willow Creek, and to Flora's amazement, the town's attitude toward her had undergone a subtle shift. There were still disapproving glances, but they were less frequent and less open. More common were inquiries about the baby's health and offers of help. Much of this change, Flora knew, was due to Xav. His unwavering support and his willingness to publicly claim concern for Hope had given others permission to show kindness. Flora wasn't naive enough to think that everyone had suddenly forgotten their moral objections to her situation, but the presence of a real baby, tiny, innocent, and fighting for life, had humanized what had previously been just a scandalous abstraction. Back at the boarding house, Xav had moved his few possessions into the storage room below Flora's, claiming it as his permanent quarters. When Flora protested that he didn't need to stay any longer, he'd simply said, "I'm not going anywhere until I'm sure you and Hope are out of danger." Mrs. Peterson, surprisingly, made no objection to this arrangement. In fact, she seemed to have appointed herself Hope's honorary grandmother, frequently appearing with herbal teas for Flora's milk production or tiny caps she'd knitted for the baby's head. One evening, a week after Hope's birth, Flora sat in the rocking chair Xav had repaired for her, nursing her daughter. A soft knock at the door was followed by Xav's voice. "Flora, are you decent? Come in," she called, adjusting her shawl to provide modesty. Xav entered, carrying a small wooden object. He stopped when he saw she was nursing, a flush rising to his cheeks. "I can come back later." "It's all right," Flora assured him. "What's that you have?" Still looking slightly uncomfortable, Xav approached and held out a beautifully carved wooden rattle. "Made this today. Thought Hope might like something to look at when she's awake." Flora took it with her free hand, touched by the simple gift. The rattle was smooth, the handle just the right size for an adult to hold while entertaining a baby. "It's beautiful, Xav. Thank you." He nodded, his eyes drifting to Hope's dark head. "She looks stronger already." "She is. Dr. Simmons said yesterday that her lungs sound clear, which is his main concern." Flora smiled down at her daughter. "She's a fighter." "Like her mother," Xav said softly. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, something warm and hopeful and terrifying in its intensity. Flora looked away first. "Xav," she began hesitantly, "you've done so much for us, more than I could ever repay, but you said yourself that you were just passing through. Your brother is expecting you. You can't stay in a storage room forever." Xav pulled a chair closer and sat, his expression serious. "Flora, there's something I need to tell you. I sent a letter to Thomas last week, explaining the situation." "Oh?" Flora felt a flutter of anxiety. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That I'd met a remarkable woman and her newborn daughter, and that I was needed here for now." He paused. "I also asked if he might have a place for you at the ranch, if you were interested. There's a small cabin that used to be the foreman's before Thomas built him a new one. It would give you and Hope privacy, but you'd be close enough for help if needed." Flora stared at him, stunned. "You want me to go to Montana? To your brother's ranch?" "Only if you want to," Xav said quickly. "I know it's sudden, and you might have other plans, but—" "What would I do there?" Flora interrupted. "I can't accept charity indefinitely, Xav." "It wouldn't be charity. Thomas's wife died 2 years ago. He has a 5-year-old daughter who's being raised by a housekeeper who's getting on in years. He mentioned in his last letter that he was looking for a governess." Xav leaned forward earnestly. "You're educated, Flora. You could teach his daughter. Earn your keep that way." Hope finished nursing and Flora adjusted her clothing before shifting the baby to her shoulder to burp. "And what about you? Where would you be in all this?" "I'd be there," Xav said simply. "Working the ranch with Thomas, like I planned. close enough to help with hope when needed, but not— He hesitated, not presuming anything more than friendship, unless you wanted it. Flora's heart pounded. The offer was tempting more than tempting. A fresh start, away from the whispers of Willow Creek, a safe place for hope to grow up, and a Xav nearby, with his quiet strength and unwavering support. I need time to think, she finally said. Xav nodded. Of course. There's no rush. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Flora, whatever you decide, know that meeting you and Hope has been the greatest blessing of my life. After he left, Flora held Hope close, tears streaming down her face. For so long she'd been alone, carrying the weight of her mistakes and their consequences. Now, suddenly, there was a possibility of something else, not just survival, but a life with meaning, perhaps even joy. The next morning, a telegram arrived for Xav. Flora was in the kitchen helping Mrs. Peterson with breakfast when he came in, his expression troubled. Everything all right? Flora asked. It's from Thomas, Xav said. There's trouble at the ranch. Cattle rustlers hit twice in the last month. He needs help. He looked at Flora apologetically. I have to go. Flora felt her newfound hope crumbling. Of course. When will you leave? Tomorrow morning. First stage north. Xav ran a hand through his hair. Flora, about what we discussed last night? It's all right, she interrupted, not wanting to hear him withdraw the offer in front of Mrs. Peterson. We can talk later. But later never seemed to come. Hope was fussy that day, requiring constant attention. Mrs. Peterson had visitors, then insisted on showing Flora a new technique for swaddling that she claimed would help the baby sleep longer. By evening, Flora was exhausted and fell asleep while nursing Hope in the rocking chair. She woke at dawn to find a blanket draped over her and Hope sleeping peacefully in her makeshift cradle. On the small table beside her was a letter addressed simply, Flora. With trembling hands, she opened it. Dear Flora, by the time you read this, I'll be on my way to Montana. I didn't want to wake you and Hope last night. You both looked so peaceful. I meant what I said about the place at the ranch. It's yours if you want it. Thomas is expecting you, should you decide to come. I've enclosed enough money for stage fare for you and Hope, plus extra for expenses along the way. I understand if you choose to stay in Willow Creek. You're beginning to make a place for yourself here, and uprooting again would be difficult, especially with a newborn. But know this. In the short time I've known you, you've changed my life. Your courage, your kindness, despite how cruelly you've been treated, your love for Hope, all of it has shown me what really matters in this world. I didn't tell you the whole truth about why I stopped in Willow Creek. Yes, I was on my way to Thomas's ranch, but I was also running from my own grief and guilt over my sister's death. I'd been drifting for months, taking odd jobs, getting into fights, drinking too much. I wasn't looking for anything or anyone when I arrived here. But then I saw you so brave, so alone, carrying your child with dignity despite the town's scorn, and something woke up in me. Something I thought had died with my sister. Hope. Whatever you decide, know that your daughter was aptly named. She brought hope back into my life, as did you. If you come to Montana, I'll be waiting. If you don't, I'll understand. Either way, I'll carry you both in my heart always. Yours, Xavi. Flora read the letter twice, tears blurring her vision. Then she folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket. Mrs. Peterson, she called, stepping into the hallway. I need to ask you something important. 2 weeks later, a stagecoach rattled and swayed along the rough road leading to Helena, Montana territory. Inside, Flora held Hope closely against her chest, the baby now wrapped in a beautiful white blanket Mrs. Barton had insisted on making as a parting gift. The decision to leave Willow Creek hadn't been easy. Despite everything, Flora had begun to form connections there. Mrs. Peterson had even offered to reduce her rent if she stayed. But in the end, the pull of what awaited in Montana, the possibility of a real home for Hope, of work that used Flora's education, and yes, of seeing Zav again, was too strong to resist. The journey had been difficult with a newborn, but Hope had proven to be a remarkably resilient baby. She was gaining weight steadily now, her early arrival seemingly forgotten as she grew stronger each day. Passengers and stage drivers alike had been surprisingly helpful along the way, moved perhaps by the sight of the young mother traveling alone with such a tiny infant. As the stagecoach crested a hill, the driver called back, "Miss Valenti, first view of your destination coming up." Flora peered out the window and gasped. Below them stretched a vast valley, green with summer grass and bordered by distant mountains still capped with snow. A river wound through the center like a silver ribbon, and nestled against its bank was a collection of buildings that must be Helena. "It's beautiful," she murmured to Hope. "Our new home." The stage continued for another hour before pulling into the bustling town. Helena was larger than Flora had expected, with substantial brick buildings lining the main street and people hurrying about their business. "The ranch is about 5 miles east," the driver told her as he helped her down. "Mr. Ellison said someone would meet you at the hotel." Flora thanked him and made her way inside the Grand Central Hotel, Hope sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. The lobby was elegant, with polished wood and brass fixtures that spoke of the town's mining wealth. "Miss Valenti?" A deep voice called from across the room. Flora turned to see a tall man approaching. He had the same blue eyes as Zav, though his hair was lighter and his build slightly heavier. "Thomas Ellison," she presumed. "Mr. Ellison?" she responded. "Call me Thomas, please." He smiled, the expression transforming his serious face into something warmer. "And this must be Hope." Flora nodded, suddenly nervous. "Yes. Thank you for agreeing to have us at your ranch. I promise I'll earn my keep." "I've no doubt of that." Thomas's eyes were kind as they studied her. "Zav speaks very highly of you." Flora's heart skipped. Is he here?" Thomas shook his head. "He's back at the ranch. We had another incident with rustlers last night. He stayed behind with the men to strengthen security." He gestured toward the door. "The wagon's outside when you're ready. Unless you prefer to rest here first?" "No, I'm ready," Flora said quickly. "We've been traveling for days. I'd rather get settled." During the ride to the ranch, Thomas told Flora about his daughter Lily, who was excited to meet her new teacher. "She's been without a mother's influence for too long," he said, a shadow crossing his face. "My wife, Rebecca, died of pneumonia 2 winters ago." "I'm sorry," Flora said sincerely. "Thank you." Thomas was quiet for a moment before continuing. "Zav said you lost your parents young as well. It seems we've all had our share of grief." "Yes," Flora agreed softly. "But we go on." Thomas gave her an approving look. "That we do." The Ellison Ranch came into view as they rounded a bend in the road. It was impressive, a large main house built of solid logs, several outbuildings, corrals, and in the distance, a smaller cabin set apart from the rest. "That will be your place," Thomas said, nodding toward the cabin. "It's simple, but sound. 2 rooms, a decent stove. We can add anything you need." "It looks perfect," Flora assured him. As they pulled into the yard, a small whirlwind in a blue dress came running from the house. "Uncle Zav, is she here? Is the baby here?" The little girl skidded to a stop when she saw Flora. "Are you Miss Flora? Is that Hope?" "Lily," Thomas admonished gently. "Remember your manners. Let our guests at least step down from the wagon." "Sorry, Papa," Lily said, though she continued to bounce with excitement. Flora smiled at the child's enthusiasm. "Yes, I'm Miss Flora, and this is Hope. She's sleeping right now, but I'm sure you can hold her later if your father approves." Lily beamed. I've been practicing with my doll. Uncle Zav showed me how to support the head and everything. Flora's heart warmed at the image of Zav teaching his niece how to hold a baby. As Thomas helped her down from the wagon, she glanced around the yard, hoping to catch sight of him. He's out checking the south pasture, Thomas said, noting her searching gaze. Should be back by supper. Flora nodded, trying not to show her disappointment. Instead, she focused on Lily, who was now peering curiously at the bundle in her arms. She's so tiny, the little girl whispered in awe as Hope yawned and opened her eyes. She was born early, Flora explained, but she's growing stronger every day. Like a little fighter, Lily said seriously. That's what Uncle Zav calls her. Flora swallowed past the sudden lump in her throat. Your uncle is right. Thomas carried Flora's trunk to the cabin while Mrs. Hoffman, the housekeeper, showed Flora around. The cabin was indeed simple but clean and well-maintained. The main room contained a table, chairs, a small sofa, and a rocking chair similar to the one Zav had repaired in Willow Creek. The bedroom held a bed with a colorful quilt, a cradle, and a chest of drawers. Mr. Xavier brought the cradle down from the attic, Mrs. Hoffman explained. It was his and Mr. Thomas's when they were babes. He spent 3 days sanding and refinishing it. Flora ran her hand over the smooth wood of the cradle, imagining Zav working on it, preparing for Hope's arrival. It's beautiful. He's been like a man possessed since he got back, Mrs. Hoffman continued, a knowing gleam in her eye. Fixing this cabin, making sure everything was just so. Never seen him take such care over anything. Before Flora could respond, Hope began to fuss, signaling her hunger. Mrs. Hoffman tactfully excused herself, promising to send someone when supper was ready. Left alone, Flora nursed Hope, and then laid her in the cradle for the first time. The baby seemed to approve of her new bed, falling asleep almost immediately. Flora took the opportunity to unpack her few belongings and freshen up with the basin of water Mrs. Hoffman had provided. As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the cabin's windows, Flora heard hoofbeats approaching. Her pulse quickened as she stepped onto the small porch. Zav was dismounting from a dusty buckskin horse, his back to her. He was speaking to one of the ranch hands, pointing toward the distant hills. Even from behind, Flora could see the easy authority in his stance. So different from the drifter who had defended her in Willow Creek. Then he turned, and their eyes met across the yard. For a moment, neither moved. Then Zav handed his reins to the ranch hand and walked toward her, his stride purposeful but unhurried, as if he was giving her time to change her mind about being there. You came, he said simply when he reached the bottom of the porch steps. We did, Flora confirmed. Hope's sleeping inside. Zav nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. Is the cabin suitable? It's perfect. Thank you for preparing it for us. Flora hesitated, then added. The cradle is beautiful. A flush crept up Zav's neck. It needed some work, but it's sturdy, been in the family for generations. They fell silent, the space between them filled with unspoken words. Finally, Flora found her courage. Your letter, she began. Did you mean what you wrote? Every word, Zav said without hesitation. Flora took a deep breath. When I first arrived in Willow Creek, I was so scared. Not just of having a baby alone, but of facing the world that had already judged me. I thought the best I could hope for was to be left in peace to raise my child. She looked directly into his eyes. I never expected to find someone who would call my baby a blessing, who would stand beside me when everyone else turned away. Zav climbed the first step, then stopped, still keeping a respectful distance. Flora, I don't want you to feel obligated in any way. The position here, the cabin, they're yours, regardless of how you feel about me. I need you to know that. I do know that, Flora said. Just as I know that the man who defended a stranger in a dusty street, who stayed up all night holding my hand through childbirth, who carved a rattle for a baby not his own. That man is someone special. She took a step toward him. Someone I could love, given time. The hope that blazed in Zav's eyes was almost blinding. I can give you all the time you need, he said, his voice rough with emotion. But Flora, I already know how I feel. I've known since I saw you holding Hope for the first time. I love you both. He climbed another step, bringing them nearly level. I'm not asking for anything right now, just the chance to show you, day by day, that you and Hope aren't alone anymore, that you never have to be alone again. Flora felt tears well up. After so many months of solitude and judgment, the simple offer of companionship of family was overwhelming. I'd like that, she whispered. From inside the cabin came Hope's cry, and Flora turned automatically toward the sound. Zav followed her inside, hovering uncertainly by the door as she lifted the baby from the cradle. She's grown, he observed, his expression soft as he looked at Hope. Yes. The doctor in the last town we passed through said she's catching up to where she should be. Flora settled in the rocking chair to soothe Hope, who wasn't hungry but simply wanted attention. Would you like to hold her? Zav nodded and carefully took the baby, his large hands gentle as they cradled her small form. Hope blinked up at him, her dark eyes curious. Hello there, little blessing, he murmured. Remember me? I'm the one who's been telling everyone how special you are. Hope made a small gurgling sound, and Zav's face lit up with delight. I think she does remember. I think she just likes the sound of your voice, Flora said, smiling. She's a good judge of character already. A knock at the door announced Lily, who had been sent to tell them supper was ready. The little girl was thrilled to find her uncle already there, holding the baby. Can I show Miss Flora my room after supper? Lily asked eagerly. I cleaned it all up special. That's for Miss Flora to decide, Zav told her. She's had a long journey and might be tired. Flora shook her head. I'd love to see your room, Lily, and perhaps tomorrow we can talk about what books you like to read. Lily beamed. I like stories about adventures and brave girls. Then we'll get along splendidly, Flora assured her. As they walked to the main house for supper, Zav carrying Hope while Lily skipped ahead, Flora felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This wasn't the life she had imagined for herself, but somehow it felt like the one she was meant to have. Supper was a lively affair, with Lily chattering about everything she wanted to learn and Thomas discussing ranch business with Xav. Flora contributed when asked, but was content mostly to observe, noting the easy affection between the brothers and the way both doted on Lily. Mrs. Hoffman had prepared a bassinet in the corner of the dining room for Hope, but the baby seemed happy to be passed among her new admirers. Even Thomas, who initially appeared somewhat intimidated by her tiny size, eventually took a turn holding her. She has a good grip, he commented, surprised, when Hope latched onto his finger. Strong, like her mother, Zav said, his eyes meeting Flora's across the table. Later, after Lily had shown Flora her room and been put to bed, and after Hope had been fed and settled back in her cradle at the cabin, Zav walked Flora back from the main house. Your family is wonderful, Flora told him as they strolled slowly through the moonlit yard. They're your family now, too, Zav said. If you want them to be. Flora stopped walking. Zav, I need to be clear about something. He turned to face her, his expression cautious. All right. Hope will always come first for me, Flora said firmly. Her well-being, her future, they're my priority. As they should be, Zav agreed. And I won't rush into anything, Flora continued. What happened with Frederick? It taught me to be careful with my heart. I understand, Zav said. I told you, Flora, there's no hurry. We have time. Flora took a deep breath. But I also need you to know that I'm not afraid to love again. That what I feel for you it's real. It's growing stronger every day. She stepped closer to him. You called hope a blessing that day in Willow Creek. You were a blessing too to both of us. Zav's eyes shone in the moonlight, slowly giving her every chance to pull away. He leaned down and pressed his lips gently to hers. The kiss was brief, almost chaste, but it contained a promise that made Flora's heart soar. "Good night, Flora," he whispered when they parted. "Good night, Zav," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion welling within her. As summer turned to fall, Flora settled into life at the Ellison Ranch. Her days took on a pleasant rhythm, mornings spent teaching Lily, afternoons tending to Hope and helping Mrs. Hoffman, evenings often passed in the company of the Ellison brothers, sometimes in the main house, sometimes in her cabin where Xav would read aloud while she sewed. Hope thrived in Montana's clean air. By 3 months, she had caught up to her expected size and was a happy, alert baby who charmed everyone on the ranch. Lily had appointed herself Hope's official protector and entertainer, a role she took very seriously. Flora and Zav's relationship progressed slowly but steadily. True to his word, he never pushed for more than she was ready to give. There were more kisses, increasingly less chaste, as Flora's trust in him deepened. There were long conversations about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. There were moments of simple companionship that meant more to Flora than grand gestures ever could. One crisp October afternoon, Flora sat on a blanket spread beneath a golden aspen tree, watching as Zav showed Lily how to safely pet a new foal. Hope, now able to sit with support, was propped against her mother's knees, babbling happily at the sight of the animals. Thomas approached from the house, smiling at the domestic scene. "They make quite a picture, don't they?" he remarked, nodding toward his brother and daughter. "They do," Flora agreed. "You know, I haven't seen Zav this happy since we were boys," Thomas said, settling beside her on the blanket. "After our sister died, something in him just shut down. He blamed himself, though there was nothing he could have done." "He told me about her," Flora said quietly. Thomas nodded. "Then you understand why finding you and Hope meant so much to him. It was like the universe gave him a second chance to make things right." Hope squealed and reached toward Zav, who looked over with a broad smile. "I think someone wants to meet the foal," he called. "Carefully," Flora cautioned as he scooped up Hope and brought her closer to the gentle mare and her baby. Thomas watched them, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know, in the spring, I'm planning to build a new house." "Oh?" Flora was surprised. "Is something wrong with this one?" "Nothing wrong with it," Thomas assured her. "But it's time Lily had a proper mother, not just a governess. I've been corresponding with a widow from back east, a friend of Rebecca's. She'll be arriving in April with her 2 children." "That's wonderful," Flora said sincerely. "Lily will be thrilled to have siblings." "Yes, I think so." Thomas hesitated. "The thing is, with a new family coming, this house will be quite full. And I was thinking." He looked meaningfully toward Zav and Hope. Flora blushed, understanding his implication. "Thomas, Zav and I haven't discussed—" "I know, I know," Thomas interrupted with a chuckle. "My brother has been painfully proper about this whole courtship. But Flora, anyone with eyes can see where this is heading." His expression grew serious. "He loves you. He loves that little girl like she was his own blood. And unless I'm much mistaken, you love him too." Flora couldn't deny it. "I do. Very much." "Then perhaps it's time someone gave my brother a nudge," Thomas suggested with a wink. "Because at the rate he's going, Hope will be walking and talking before he works up the courage to propose." Flora laughed, though her heart raced at the thought. "You're incorrigible, Thomas Ellison." "Runs in the family," he replied, standing as Xav and Lily returned with Hope. "I'll leave you to think about what I said." And think about it Flora did, through the golden autumn and into the first snowfall of winter. By December, Hope was crawling everywhere, keeping Flora constantly busy. The baby's first Christmas was approaching, and the entire ranch was in a festive mood despite the bitter cold outside. One evening, as a blizzard raged, Flora sat by the fire in her cabin, mending one of Lily's dresses while Hope slept peacefully in her cradle. A knock at the door startled her. Visitors were rare during storms. "Xav," she called, opening the door to find him bundled against the cold, snow covering his coat and hat. "Sorry to disturb you," he said, stamping his boots on the porch. "Just wanted to make sure you and Hope had enough firewood to last the night. This storm's worse than we expected." "We're fine," Flora assured him, pulling him inside. "But you shouldn't have come out in this. It's dangerous." Xav shrugged as he removed his outer layers. "Worth it to know you're safe." Flora busied herself making coffee, touched by his concern yet exasperated by his risk-taking. "You could have frozen to death." "It's only a quarter mile from the main house," Xav pointed out, accepting the steaming cup she offered. "Besides, I needed to see you." Something in his tone made Flora look up sharply. "Is something wrong?" "No," Xav said quickly. "Nothing's wrong, in fact." He set down his coffee and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small object. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. But I'm beginning to think there's no perfect moment, just the one you choose to take." Flora's breath caught as she realized what he was holding. A ring, simple but beautiful, with a small diamond that caught the firelight. "Flora Valenti," Xav said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "From the moment I saw you in that dusty street, something inside me knew you were special. When I held Hope for the first time, I felt as if she was already part of me." He took Flora's hand. "I love you both more than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me? Let me be a father to Hope, a husband to you?" Tears blurred Flora's vision as joy overwhelmed her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Xav. We would be honored to be your family." Xav slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the love and promise of their future together. A small cry from the cradle interrupted them. Hope was awake, demanding attention as usual. Xav laughed and went to pick her up. "Your timing needs work, little blessing," he told her affectionately. "I was having an important moment with your mother." Hope gurgled and patted his cheek with her tiny hand as if in approval. "I think she's happy about this arrangement," Flora said, coming to stand beside them, her heart full as she looked at the man and the child who had become her world. "Smart girl," Xav replied, wrapping his free arm around Flora. "She knows a good thing when she sees it." Outside, the blizzard continued, but inside the small cabin, warmed by fire and love, a family that had been forged through hardship and kindness looked forward to the blessings yet to come. They were married on New Year's Day, 1877, in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Thomas stood as Xav's best man, while Mrs. Hoffman held Hope, now 7 months old and determined to be part of the proceedings. Lily scattered pine needles in lieu of flower petals, a winter substitution she was quite proud of inventing. The local minister spoke of new beginnings and God's grace as Flora and Xav exchanged vows. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Xav's kiss was both tender and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. That night, after Hope was asleep in what was now their bedroom in the main house, Thomas having insisted they take the larger room while he moved to the cabin temporarily, Flora and Xav finally became truly husband and wife. Their lovemaking was gentle at first, mindful of Flora's inexperience, but grew more passionate as they discovered each other fully at last. Afterward, lying in Xav's arms, Flora marveled at how far she had come from the frightened, lonely woman who had arrived in Willow Creek. "What are you thinking about?" Xav asked, stroking her hair. "How strange life is," Flora replied. "If I hadn't been in that street when the brawl broke out, if you hadn't stopped to help me, I believe we would have found each other somehow," Xav said confidently. "Some things are meant to be." Flora smiled up at him. "Like a cowboy and a fallen woman?" "Like a brave mother and the man who recognized her child as the blessing she is," Xav corrected, kissing her forehead. "Our story was written in the stars, Flora Ellison." "I like the sound of that," Flora murmured. "Flora Ellison." "So do I," Xav agreed, pulling her closer. "Almost as much as I like the sound of Papa, when Hope is old enough to say it." Flora's heart swelled with love. "She'll be saying it soon enough, and perhaps—" She hesitated, suddenly shy. "Perhaps in time, she'll have siblings to teach the word to." Zav's eyes widened. "You want more children?" "With you, yes," Flora said softly. "A whole houseful, if you're willing." The joy that illuminated Zav's face was answer enough, but his whispered, "Nothing would make me happier," sealed the promise of their future, one built on love, respect, and the shared blessing of a child who had brought them together. Spring arrived with its promise of renewal, bringing with it Thomas's new wife and her children. The ranch expanded, both in buildings and in cattle, as Zav took on more responsibility alongside his brother. Flora continued to teach Lily and now the two newcomers as well, finding fulfillment in using her education. Hope took her first steps on her first birthday, toddling determinedly from Flora to Zav, with a proud grin that revealed her first 4 teeth. The entire household celebrated with a special dinner and a small cake that Hope enthusiastically smashed more than ate. By her second birthday, Hope was a constant chatterbox who followed Papa everywhere, wearing tiny boots he'd had made specially for her and insisting on helping with the ranch chores. Her dark hair had grown into curls that bounced when she ran, and her eyes had stayed the deep brown she'd been born with. And on the morning of Hope's 3rd birthday, Flora woke Zav with news that made him whoop with joy, swinging her around their bedroom until she laughingly begged him to put her down. "Are you certain?" he asked, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach. "As certain as one can be," Flora confirmed. "Dr. Mitchell says I'm about 2 months along. We should expect a summer baby." Zav dropped to his knees, pressing his lips to her midsection. "Hello in there, little blessing," he whispered. "We're already looking forward to meeting you." Hope burst into their room then, excited for her birthday celebrations, and squealed with delight when Zav told her she would be a big sister soon. "Like Lily is to me?" she asked, her small face serious. "Just like that," Zav confirmed. "You'll have to teach the baby all the important things, like how to pet a horse and which cookies are the best." Hope nodded solemnly, accepting this responsibility with all the gravity a 3-year-old could muster. "I will be the best big sister," she declared. Looking at her daughter and her husband, Flora felt tears of happiness well up. From the darkest time in her life had come this perfect joy, a family built on love and acceptance, a husband who had seen her child as a blessing when others saw only shame. That evening, as they watched Hope blow out the candles on her birthday cake, with considerable help from Lily, Zav slipped his arm around Flora's waist. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "More than I ever dreamed possible." Zav kissed her temple. "You know, that day in Willow Creek, when I said your baby was my blessing too, I had no idea how true those words would become." Flora turned in his arms to face him. "I think perhaps you did know, somewhere deep inside. Some part of you recognized that we belonged together, even then." "Perhaps," Zav conceded with a smile. Or perhaps I just knew a good thing when I saw it. Either way, Flora said, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. I'm grateful every day that you stopped to help a woman in trouble. Best decision I ever made, Xav replied, his arms tightening around her. And one I'd make again in a heartbeat. As their family gathered around them, celebrating Hope's birthday and the promise of a new life to come, Flora thought back to that dusty street in Willow Creek, where a single act of kindness had changed everything. From being mocked and shunned for carrying a child alone, she had found a man who saw that child as a blessing, and in doing so, had blessed Flora's life beyond measure. The past was behind them now. Ahead lay only the future they would build together, one day at a time, with love as their foundation and hope as their guiding star.